So school climate is the quality and character of the school. It motivates learning and prevents or reduces risk behavior. So if it's an unsafe school climate, which we have, it's quite pervasive, no matter where you live, you're going to have learning, decreased motivational learning, and higher risk behaviors. School connectedness reflects relationships with peers, teachers, and parents. So how easy is it for parents to get involved? What kind of community are you living in? Are parents considered stakeholders? Are parents considered involved? And then what do the schools do to make up for that? Because the reality is there's going to be certain communities, and just by study, so lower socioeconomic communities that aren't going to have strong parental involvement. And if that's the case, schools often still rely on their parental involvement. If you don't have strong parental buy-in and involvement, you're not going to have strong schools because teachers can only do so much. So then where do they get that extra buy-in? Do they have volunteers? Do they have consistent volunteers? What kind of peer outreach is there? What kind of teachers do you have? Do you have a lot of older teachers who are just so burnt out and jaded by years and years of working in an underprivileged school? Not to say it's the teacher's fault, but that's definitely going to play a role if most of the teachers fall into that category. And then also your administration. So policies and practices should be health specific and evidence-based when talking about a healthy school environment. So if you have a high pregnancy rate in your school, you need to have policies and practices that are aimed toward that pregnancy rate. Not saying that you need to this one school is going to have condoms in every hallway, but definitely having some pregnancy prevention programs in place, whereas maybe the school down the road doesn't have that problem and doesn't need to put as much emphasis on it. And then, of course, using evidence-based practice. So, for example, evidence-based practice doesn't support abstinence education. Evidence just shows that it's not effective with adolescents to prevent sex. And better is safe sex and education on birth control. And so, but you would say, some of you might be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't we do those? Like, talk about those things in school, but in some states it's still not allowed, and they still rely on abstinence to prevent pregnancies and STIs in schools. And because it's not evidence-based, then you're obviously not really providing a healthy school environment per what the CDC guidelines say. So that's actually a really hot topic issue, and just an area that's always going to need strong nursing leadership. So support evidence-based policies and practices in schools through local school wellness policies. So the MMWR talks about school health guidelines to promote healthy eating and physical activity. Putting local school wellness policies into action. You can look all this up on the CDC website. District wellness policies address nutrition. We've talked about that. And I know a lot of people, there was a lot of kind of back and forth with Michelle Obama's school nutrition activities, and some studies show it was effective, some show that it wasn't effective. But the studies that are positive showed it was effective in a sense that students understood about nutrition. Now, a lot of the issue is that a school can only do so much. A student's only there for so many hours a day. Not every school district can afford to provide breakfast and lunch for all the students, let alone the craziest, most healthy lunches. And then you also have to understand that when you use a government-supported nutrition system, they're always going to fall under the food pyramid or whatever is supported by the FDA, not the FDA, I'm sorry, the USDA, which is still part of the Department of Agriculture, and they're not going to sit around saying, bad-mouthing wheat and grain when that's the biggest crop in the United States, right? So the Department of Agriculture is probably not the best system to develop our nutrition pyramid, but in reality, that's what it is. However, there's still healthy ways to eat grain and bread, and I think that's where that whole nutrition gambit came through. So there were some good outcomes with that, especially with the physical activity. and just talking about, the 5 and 5, so the 5 fruits and vegetable servings, and bringing that into the schools. Schools should ensure that their policies and practices are evidence-based. The CDC health guidelines for promoting healthy eating and physical activity uses 9 evidence-based guidelines and 33 evidence-based strategies. So, doing a good job. Fewer than 20% of schools have vending machines. School stores or snack bars that sell food, beverages high in fat and added sugar. So right away, that was something that was tackled immediately, because things like a little pack of M&Ms or a little pack of Snickers is actually not supposed to be a regular thing for the human body, and it has become that. How many of you only go out to eat or go through the drive-thru once a month? And that includes for any meal ever, right? So if any of you say, I literally, every meal generates from my house except once a month, that's awesome, and you are doing a good job, and the CDC applauds you. But for the majority of the homes in America, that is not true. And there lives a very large percentage of low socioeconomic students who have every single meal outside their home. And once you leave your home environment and buy food from an outside vendor, you are guaranteeing that there's going to be high sugar and high fat content in at least one of those meals, because of just the reality of processed foods and fast food and restaurant food. So even if a restaurant tells you, like, this is from our fit menu, they're still going to have high amounts of sodium in there, because that's the reality of making restaurant food affordable. So only 6% of schools in the United States have vending machines, school stores, or snack bars that just sell fruits or vegetables. Almost 75% of schools permit students to carry a drinking water bottle during the day, so that's good. It used to be that they couldn't. Almost 25% of schools allow soft drink companies to advertise soft drinks on vending machines. So that's also something really important to avoid, because, one thing that was tough is that schools use that advertisement and they use the funding for it. But quite honestly, they can't, because it's just inviting kids to make decisions to drink from soft drinks. And soft drinks add a lot of sugar to your daily intake. So almost 90% of schools follow national, state, or district physical education standards. That's good. But only 4% of schools provide daily physical education throughout the school year. Now, I know for me, I didn't have gym every day. It was 3 times a week, so I fell under the needs improvement. Over 90% of schools with students in grades K through 5 have regularly scheduled recess, but only 45% of schools provide opportunity for students to take physical breaks outside of physical education class. Physical breaks, activity breaks for students is not only helpful for obviously preventing obesity, but it's also helpful with the onset of ADD and treatment for ODD. Regularly scheduled exercise breaks is quite helpful for those with learning disabilities, because it's going to exert the extra energy that's built up. So, health education increases knowledge about health and healthy behaviors. It teaches skills for practicing healthy behaviors. And it also affects behaviors and outcomes, so increases condom use, improves BMI overall, and decreases smoking, which is really important, because some students really don't understand how bad tobacco is for their body. Oftentimes they think that as long as they only do it when they're young, that it won't be a problem. They don't understand that even being around secondhand smoke is actually quite dangerous. And then understanding about BMI. I get a lot of adolescents who come in and they're very concerned about their BMI, as am I. And they don't understand about food and how it is related to their diets, or related to their weight. So, sugary sports drinks and ramen noodles and canned food, they don't see the correlation. And that's because nobody has been there to teach it to them. And then, of course, we've talked about increase in condom use.